Hi, good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN. We're a nonprofit that presents programming exploring human development across the lifespan. We are so excited and honored to welcome you to tonight's conversation between DeMar DeRozan and Hanif Abdurraqib. Thanks for joining us. Our YouTube channel has an archive of over 350 videos of past events, so be sure to subscribe to the channel to get updates when new recordings are posted. We are thrilled to welcome back Hanif Abdurraqib, who we most recently hosted earlier this year for his incredible New York Times bestselling book, There's Always This Year, on Basketball and Ascension, which was just longlisted for the National Book Award for Nonfiction. I wonder if that's out of date. A 2021 MacArthur Fellow, Hanif's 2021 book, A Little Devil in America, Notes in Praise of Black Performance, was a finalist for the 2021 National Book Award for Nonfiction. DeMar DeRozan is a six-time NBA All-Star and two-time gold medalist for the United States men's basketball team. A father of five, DeRozan frequently returns to community centers in Compton, California, where he once practiced as a teenager to mentor the next generation of basketball players. DeMar's 2024 book, Above the Noise, My Story of Chasing Calm, is a powerful, moving memoir, and we are honored that he has made time to be with all of us this evening. And now let's welcome DeMar DeRozan and Hanif Abdurraqib.
Thank you, Lonnie. Yeah, thank you for having us. DeMar, man, congrats on the book. It's really beautiful. I really love spending time with it, and I really thank you for writing it. You know, it spoke to a lot of corners of living that I didn't have language for, so thank you for offering that language.
Man, thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, and of course, having been a fan, I'm a fan of you as a player, though the most recent time I saw you play live, I'm a Timberwolves fan, and I saw you play against them in March of last year, and you put up 49. And I remember why, it was one of those games where I was like, man, I hope he misses every now and then. Thank you for your work. And what I wanted to open with was I loved how beautifully you rendered and talked about where you're from, and the impacts on where we're from, particularly I think Black folks in America, the impacts on how where we're from impact the way that we see ourselves and see our abilities to kind of communicate what we're feeling and going through. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the realization of your geography, your place of birth, your place of coming up, on how you felt like you could talk about what you were enduring when you were younger, or these kind of things.
Yeah, I think being a kid growing up in urban community, everything feel such a norm because you don't know nothing else. There's nothing else for you to go off of. So a lot of things, for me that I used to see, whether if it was, on TV, was always, a fantasy. So for me, I thought the way I grew up was normal, because everybody that I was close to, family members, friends, we was all going through the same type of struggle. And we always made the most out of whatever we had, not knowing we didn't have much. And with that, it builds up it kind of hardens you as you get older, because you're used to the aggression, the aggressive nature that you grow up in, and you kind of thrive off that, just figuring out how to live and survive through a lot of tough times, and just relying on love through, whether if it's friends, your neighborhood, or family. So for me, my childhood always just felt normal until, I was around 15, 16, 17 years old. You was able to see other walks of life, through basketball. And, you start to realize there's more to the world than just growing up in Compton.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask next, you kind of led into it, because I had a similar experience. My environment was the only environment I knew. And then I hit a point where I realized that the world was bigger than my couple blocks, and that was jarring to me. Do you have a moment when you were younger when you remembered realizing that the place you're from and the place you love isn't the only place? And what impact did that have on you mentally, emotionally, all of it?
Yeah, I think I remember being young and going to like one of my dad's friend's house. That was probably like, an hour away from home. It was somewhere in LA. It was somewhere. It wasn't Compton. And I just remember riding with him to his friend's house, and you start to see, nicer cars everywhere. The street lights different, the street signs are shaped different. You know, the houses on the block is different. You don't see liquor stores every other block. And you start to wonder, you know, I remember always being very, you know, inquisitive when it came to my dad, asking him, you know, why they don't have, you know, liquor stores, or why we don't have this, or why we don't have nice houses like that. And you could just tell the zip code is much different going outside of, you know, growing up, and, you know, going to my friend's house and it being in the middle of the summer, and you walk in the house and you feel AC on, you know,
Right. Yeah.
and little things like that just played a big part, or even having an ice machine that you get out the refrigerator, you know, glass, drinking out of glasses instead of, you know, plastic cups, you know, just small things like that when I was around like 11, 12 years old, that made me question like why we don't have this, why is this different? And, you know, it just starts from being in different areas.
Right. Right. I really appreciated the way you wrote about your relationship with your father in the book, particularly around training and the way he pushed you, right? Like I think, you know, I think all the time, like I played sports growing up. I grew up around athletes, and there are ways that our parents, most often, I think fathers, end up pushing us that gets us to a place where we want to go, maybe, you know, achieves the things we want to achieve. But there's a lot of challenges in that path to achievement. And so I have two questions that I'm gonna ask them separately. But the first question is, how did you find yourself reckoning with the kind of gratitude maybe for your father pushing you the way he pushed you, while also kind of wrestling with the challenges that came with being pushed in that way and the impact those challenges have?
Yeah, it was always rough, especially being a kid. All you want is, you know, love and affection, you know, especially from your parents. You never want to let your parents down. So for me, a lot of times when he did push me, in that moment, I probably didn't understand it, but, you know, it could be something. I remember a situation, my dad being on me about school, because I used to, you know, I used to always get in fights at school. And, you know, I remember it was a time I got in a fight at school, and, you know, I always run to my mom first because she was always like the lenient one in a sense, and, you know, kind of let stuff slide a little bit because I was her only son. And I remember the day when I called her when I got in a fight at school. She said, "I'm not coming. You call your dad." And I was so terrified to call him, and it made me realize like I don't want to be in this position again. I have to call my dad because he was that hard on me, and it just showed me, you know, he just wanted me to be on the right path and not get in trouble. And from then on, it was like I didn't want to put myself in another situation to have to call my dad, because that his his authority was much different, and I understood it right then and there why he pushed me so hard with a lot of things, and that carried over with whether if it was sports and everything I did, just to be the best version of me that I could be. And I just always kept that in mind. So that's why I always credit my dad with so much, because he was so hard on me, but it was a greater reason behind it every single time.
The second thing I was thinking about this, you know, for me, we're in a cool era because a lot of the players I came up watching in like my formative years as a fan, now a lot of their young kids are entering the league, you know, or, you know, you see a last name or you go, it's like, oh man, I was like Dale Davis's kid is in the league, like these kind of things. Um, and I'm wondering, not just, you know, you're a father now, and I'm not just asking this in terms of pushing your kids athletically, but broadly, how you know, you and your father's relationship in that kind of idea of like pushing you to be great and understanding the tension there. What is that? I understand what that taught you as an athlete, but what has that taught you as a person and now someone who is responsible for pushing young people under your care?
Discipline, you know, it instilled in me discipline, patience, and understanding for whatever's in front of you, you know. And that's that was a great attribute that I took from my dad, was the discipline, the understanding, and the patience that when it comes to something. And, you know, being a father, that's something you got to have too, and something you got to instill in your children as well, because sometimes kids may do something and think it's the end of the world with emotions, and You know, you got to teach them understanding, patience, and discipline when it comes to something, so they understand right from wrong. And you know, I think for me, my parents was my right from wrong in a lot of my decision making, because I always considered their thoughts and their feelings before I went out and did something, you know, that I shouldn't be doing. You know, so for me, um, that's one thing I teach my kids, and it's still a learning process. You know, and sometimes that's the beauty within it, because you know, when you have kids, it brings out another element of you, because it take you back to your parents, what your parents used to do for you and tell you all the times when you was young. So, you know, it's a continuous learning process for sure.
Yeah. I love the way you write about, I love the way you wrote about Compton. I've heard you talk about Compton before, and what I love about it is that like that is a place, um, and I am from a place like this, at least in the place where I'm from, where people talk about it. People who aren't from there, who don't know it, they talk about it in a certain way. And so I believe it's on the people who know it and love it to talk about it in a way that acts in opposition to that, you know? And so I really love the way you talk about where you're from, because you're honest about it, but there's a real
Hmm.
affection there. You know, you're not kind of creating this mythology. You're actually talking about the real aspects of it, but there's a real love there. And so this is like a broad question, but I'm wondering how your love and your feelings about Compton changed. Because like when I came up, I loved my neighborhood, but I loved it differently than I do now. You know, I kind of
Hmm.
wanted to get out, and then I didn't want to get out at all. So how have your feelings towards Compton changed as you've kind of grown and, you know, in some ways left it behind, but in some ways certainly not.
Um, the love, the appreciation, and admiration, and understanding that I have for the city that molded me, you know, it's just giving me more of a passion for my city. One, because you know I could relate. I know what it's like walking up and down those same streets when I go back and I see young kids playing or doing certain things. Um, it's like I want to I want to be a inspiration to those same kids to look at me and know that I understand them, because I know what it's like. And and for me, it makes me look at my city even more, because it's so much great talent, not even just with sports. Up from top to bottom, there's so much talent in Compton that can make it out, and you just want to give that inspiration and that belief that they could do it. So for me, my love and aspiration grew even more, because without that city, I don't think I would be who I am today.
I kind of wanted to pivot slightly to you know, that the tweet that you talk about that everyone knows about, you know, the depression getting the best of me. I remember I saw that, um, like I think I was awake, you know, I was for some reason awake when that, so I saw it like in real time.
Hmm.
And I remember being like really moved, like just immediately moved by it, because um, you know, I am also someone who lives with depression, but I don't think you know, to be someone with your platform to kind of present that to the world. What was your thought process in that moment? And did you think that that tweet would create the reaction it did, or were you kind of just like, I want to say this, and then I'm gonna leave it alone?
Yeah, it was an impulsive emotion in that time, you know, and I took it straight to Twitter, not thinking about an outcome. It was just truly how I was feeling at that time in the middle of the night by myself. Um, I think I was like sitting in a laundry room of my house and sent that tweet. That's how I just was like feeling in that exact moment, you know. And when I woke up, you know, my mind wasn't on what I tweeted, you know, it was on to the next day.
Hmm.
Um, you know, but it opened me up in a whole nother way, because I expressed something through Twitter of how I truly was feeling that, you know, most people don't talk about, you know, and I didn't put in consideration what had happened from that. But, you know, to this day, I'm glad I did have that impulsive reaction, because you know, it led me to be able to do something like this.
Yeah. You touch on this in the book, but for those who haven't read the book, and I think this could be an important thing for people to hear, can you talk about when you first understood depression as something you could put a name to inside your own brain and body? Like, what was the moment where you said, this is different, like I'm feeling different, and there's a word for it?
Um, I mean, I think you know, looking at emotions up to looking back at emotions before that point and even after, you know, you realize, you know, that feeling or that word depression was something that we kind of all go through unknowingly. And it was something that was, you know, I kind of say, you know, those moments where anger and frustration come out of nowhere, you know, and you don't know why. For me, I think when I start paying attention to so many people, other stories, and they have the same type of breakdown of, you know, emotions and anger and aggression, and you know, I felt exactly where they was coming from, and it made the most sense to me. You know, certain songs you can listen to and it hit different because you understand what's going on when those emotions hit. And I think, you know, it really hit for me at that after that point, after I sent out that tweet.
You you know, Coach Popovich wrote the forward to the book, and you've been really open about your relationship with him. Of course, like our thoughts are with him currently, but I think there's something really tender and wonderful about the way that you both speak about each other, because so often as fans, we see the coach-player relationship one way. We see it as this
Mm-hmm.
kind of maybe transactional is not the word, but maybe it is, right? We see it as this
Mm-hmm.
kind of transactional relationship where there's a coach trying to get the most out of a player, the player responds to that. But there seemed like something really deep and unique about what you and Pop shared when you were in San Antonio, which also felt like a very needed thing for you at that time. So what was, you know, and I kind of want to I'm trying to get us to back into Toronto, but I think that era of San Antonio is really interesting because it seems from your book and from what we've all read and heard that you landed in a place kind of looking for grounding. How did you and Coach Popovich's relationship evolve from that place of coming to San Antonio and maybe needing something and him kind of evolving into that person you needed?
Um, I don't know. It's just something about Coach Pop, the empathy he has, the knowledge, the understanding. You know, he you know, I call him, you know, the godfather of sports, because his aura, his attention to detail, his empathy, his outlook on life is so incredible and so deep, to where when I went there, he didn't view me as a player that was coming to help win him basketball games. He viewed me as an individual first and foremost. It was never nothing about basketball. Like, and that approach was so different because, like you said, you know, when you a player and you know, go play for a team, you have a certain type of relationship with a coach, and with him, it was never basketball first and foremost. And that was something that was so different and shocking right away, because you know, what's up, coach? It's like we man, and the conversations and the way he approached me, he made it everything but basketball, and that gave me a level and a comfort that I didn't know I realized until he approached me that way. I think if
Yeah.
he would have approached it like, you know, I was a player, I think I would have had a more pushback type of quiet demeanor, just go out, do my job, and get away from the game. But he approached me like a man, like a father, and that's that stuck with me, because he really embraced me in a way of you know, like he known me since I was a teenager, and it made everything else easy from there, to play there, to go out there and play every single night for him, whatever it may be. So that was something special from his end. I got to credit that all to Pop.
There's you know, a theme in the book for me was kind of place. I mean, I talked early about how you were so good at talking about how geography impacted your mental health and your feelings on the world. And of course, one central place in your career is Toronto. Um, and you know, like for it's interesting because I still, you know, as a fan, um, I of course know all the stops you've had in your career, but the most vibrant, like I remember those Toronto days, you know, when you were kind of battling in the playoffs every year, you know, and
Mhm.
I'm interested in hearing from you about what it was about Toronto um, that made kind of the NBA a good place to land for you, you know, and what did Toronto mean for you, and how did you build an ecosystem of care in Toronto that allowed for you to thrive there?
Yeah, that one easy because that, in fact, 18, 19 years of my life, I was hesitant to ever leave home. Obviously, when I went to college, a big reason why I stayed home was I was scared. I was scared to leave home. I didn't want to leave home, so I stayed home. Telling myself, if I make the NBA, it's a good chance that I probably don't play home. So let me at least enjoy home um, one last time as best as I can, not knowing I'd end up in a whole nother country. Um, so I think that was just a blessing in disguise for me because that was something I needed to be able to separate myself from home and get out of my comfort zone and kind of grow internally um, and see something new. And I jumped in that full-fledged on because that was something I needed. Going to Toronto, everything was new for me. The way I dressed, the way, the food, the culture, everything was completely different. That was an adjustment for me that I accepted. And, I kind of look forward to it even more because, it helped me pay attention to the most important things in my life. And one at that time was, my occupation. I wanted to be the best. So I had no distractions. I didn't have to worry about friends and family all around me. It was just me my whole first year. And, I learned everything so much faster, how to live by myself, how to, tend to myself in different ways to where, mom and pops they don't live 10, 15 minutes away. I could just go over there, get a home cooked meal, sleep in my bed and see friends, go to my neighborhood, have all these other distractions. So Toronto embraced me while I was a teenager. And because of that, like that'll always be my second home because that place, raised me into being the adult that I became to be.
So I've thought about this question all day because I don't want to get you. I'm definitely not trying to get you to like disparage the NBA in any way, but we know it's a business. Like it is ultimately a business. Um, and we have seen, or I have seen as a fan, I mean, like truly, I'm a Timberwolves fan, so I just saw this like 3 months ago, right? Like guys, trade happens, people are surprised, sometimes players are surprised. Is there do you think that there are any ways that could be implemented where players can be better cared for, even understanding it's a business, that players
Yeah.
can kind of be better cared for in the process of just receiving that news, moving from one place to the
Yeah.
next, like setting up a place for success?
Yeah, but like you said, man, it's so tough because it is a business, and sometimes in a business you got to make split decisions right then and there. That this is same as players. I think it go both ways to where somebody got to make a decision right then and there. What's best for their company, and sometimes you got that split second to make that decision, then you got to share it. So I think it's just so tough in those situations because you know it's tough. I just know if it hits you, how hard it hit players. I know it hit me the way it hit me, and through having conversations with other players that have been traded, some people don't bounce back mentally, emotionally from it. So I think you just got to be more aware. When you step into a situation and understand that like, nothing is forever. No matter who you are, all you got to go into a situation caring about is what you could control. Do that to the best of your ability, and when it's time to make your decision, you make what's best for you. But it's going to happen. It's been there in sports forever, and I think it's just something that you really can't really prepare for, other than you just making sure you're doing everything you could control.
Yeah. How have you kind of evolved in taking care of your mental, because the work is demanding, like the work that you do is massively demanding, and sometimes does not leave a lot of time, right,
Mm-hmm.
for yourself. And also, um the kind of scrutiny. One thing I appreciate out of your book and just appreciate in general, like there's a real level of that you talk about, like there's a real level of scrutiny that NBA players are facing, not just
Mm-hmm.
by being watched every night, but the minute you step off the court, you got to answer for whatever went on the floor, and then you got to take
Mm-hmm.
that home, and then you got to um, how have you evolved from the 18-year-old going to another country to now? How have you found these ways to manage your mental health in a way that still allows you to be the high level player you are, but also treats yourself well?
I think you got to find multiple things of self-care for yourself that you got to do consistently, because it becomes draining being in this occupation at times, because now the fame and attention is at you constantly. Sometimes, you know, with social media, you can't escape from, a lot of the scrutiny that you deal with. I remember just the other day I was talking to a player that he tired of fans getting on him if he don't score 20 points, but they won the game. He frustrated because everybody all in his thing talking about, you messed up my parlay, you messed up my parlay, and
Yeah.
the play one. So it's like sometimes you gotta step away from social media at times. Sometimes it may not be a good time to click on that app. It's not worth shifting your emotions. So for me, I just try to find different ways that feel like it's self-care for me emotionally and mentally, to where it makes me feel like I'm escaping from, you know, the attention that I may get from being in the NBA. So I try to do that as much as I can, and sometimes surrounding yourself just by a great support system, to where you feel like you're escaping from, work, when you're around certain friends and family members, or sometimes just in the house, find something you can indulge in, whether if it's a movie, a learning activity, whatever it may be. I think for me, that's something I always tend to do, so I don't get caught up in, the hardship of my occupation.
Yeah, man, you brought up the part. Like, reading your book, I thought so much about how the influx of gambling is going to be another
Yeah, it's
mental
a
health
whole, yeah.
crisis. Like it's like, again, for players, like it just wasn't. When social media first popped off, and like you could just comment whatever on it, that part, gambling, like wasn't as prominent as now. And I've been thinking
Hmm.
about this. Like, I'm not really in the game myself, but like people have so much individual stake on players' performances now that I worry about that. Like, I worry about the mental health impact of people's gambling
Yeah,
projecting itself on players.
1,000%.
I don't know what the plan is for that, but it feels like that's gonna take us down a bad road. I mean, yeah. What is it? When you kind of I do want to talk about the how, like how you leaving Toronto was jarring for you. We're very open about that. We're very open about it in the book. For those who haven't read the book, and who are going to read the book, if you're in this Zoom, please order the book and get the book and read the book. But how did you kind of step by step learn to rebuild yourself? Because you did say a thing that is true. Like, some players don't recover from these kind of
Hmm.
big movements, and it's not like your recovery was seamless, but I mean, you really rebuilt kind of like a second and third and fourth and fifth act of your career, Um, how did, from a mental stand, not just from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, what did you do to kind of recover from the dislocating feelings of being kind of moved on from Toronto?
I mean, that's a great question. I think for me, once I accepted leaving from a place that I started, that I wanted to be, my whole career, when you move on from that, and, you see kind of the ripple effect that it have on fans, that it have on, you know, people, you kind of take a step back and kind of like analyze everything that's going on, because it becomes such a hectic type of situation, and you kind of put everything in perspective. So for me, when that happened, it took a while. Granted, I didn't figure this out right away, but
Yeah.
you know, I just put a lot of stuff in perspective, more so looking at it like, we only get so long to play this game. Like, and I don't want to dwell on an excuse or something that could emotionally put me down, when basketball gave me the opportunity to see places, to travel, to do things that I never would have imagined I'd be able to do, especially from basketball. So for me, I just started to put in perspective, saying, as long as I can play this game, I'm gonna give it everything that I can. and whatever it gives me back in a process of it, I'm a accept it, because we only get to do this so long. So I just look at it from here of looking at it like every step of the way, whatever I go through, I'm gonna make the best out of it, wholeheartedly, from a genuine place, and that's from having a love of the game, and from that, did 3 great years in San Antonio, 3 great years in Chicago, now being here in uh, Sacramento, having a new journey. Sometimes just accepting your journey and making the most out of it is the beauty of the journey, and just accepting that. So for me, that's all I did.
I'm gonna ask like one more question about kind of the interior stuff, and then I would just love to ask a few hoops. I would love to talk ball
Yeah,
for a
for
second,
sure.
but
Yeah.
you right now you're injured, not like but you sat out a few games. How
Hmm.
a thing that I feel like players don't always talk openly about is coping with injury, because if you are in the NBA, at least ideally, you love the game, you love playing the game, and you want to be out there. Um,
Hmm.
how do how have you've had a career where you've had many, many healthy seasons, but how do you cope with these kind of injuries, small and large, like even missing 4 or 5 games while you got to
Yeah.
watch when the guys are out there? Like, how do you cope with that?
Patience. That's to go back to me just having understanding whatever the injury is, having patience, then having the discipline to be able to do everything you need to do to get back on the court so that same injury don't occur again. So it's the same thing that my dad taught me. Just having that patience, understanding, and discipline to do whatever you need to do to get back out there and be healthy, so that same situation don't happen again. And granted, I've been more than lucky, health to be play over 90% of my games in a 16-year career. So I just try to stay on trend with that. Um, yeah, and that's just always my mindset and my mental. Even beforehand, even before injury, just doing all the things to keep your body in tip top shape. So if something do happen, you could bounce back faster.
I wanted to talk about just you as a player, because one thing that's been interesting to watch is that, like, no matter where you've gone, I think you established a certain style of play in Toronto, of course, but since then, it's felt like you can kind of just like plug into any system and play. Like you kind of have, I was watching some of the early Kings games, and I was like, man, it feels like you're just kind of you do what you do wherever you land. And I'm not
Hmm.
saying there are no growing pains. I'm sure there's growing pains when you get to a new team and figure it out. But what do what techniques have you, as a player, like have you leaned on in order to have this kind of reliability of you can kind of just plug into a team and keep kind of working at what you do well, and the team just folds around that?
I think just me having a love for the game. Me just having a love and a passion for the game, and not, looking at the game from one way and thinking my way is the way it should be done. I just look at it. I always think of the Bruce Lee quote of be formless, be shapeless like water. So you be able to adapt to anything. So I always have that mindset approaching, you know, every situation I've been in basketball, because you look at it when you young, you're a kid, you go to the park, you know you're gonna be playing with different people every single day. The goal
Yeah.
is to win, and it's like, what are you willing to do and understand so y'all can get the win? Um, and that's just how I view the game. Just being prepared, being ready, being a great teammate, and being able to be formless in a sense when it's time to step on the court.
How has it felt? I know you're not in LA, but how has it felt to be playing as a professional back in California, and with this team too? Like I know right now De'Aaron Fox is on like a tear, but um I love the Kings. I love Sabonis. I've always loved Sabonis's reliability, where you just know that he can get you like a triple double whenever.
Hmm.
And I just love this team. I love Keegan Murray. Like, how has it been not just being in California again, but kind of being with the Kings, a team that, like, for a lot of years people wrote them off as a kind of hopeless castaways, but now they're in this wonderful moment where it feels like the city's embracing them. They have a culture about them, and they got some young guys who yeah. How was it felt to be back in California and playing with this team specifically?
I mean, it's felt great. It's something new, closest I've been to home. It's different being on
Oh, Pacific time.
on Pacific time.
Yeah.
Because like I'm used to, watching games all night, catching all the West Coast games late at night and everything. So it's been cool. It's definitely easier for family to come in and out. It's easier for me to get back home if I needed to get back home for any reason. So, it's been cool. It's been fun. And it's, like I love it. It's everything that, I could imagine, and it's kind of been one of those things that, I remember playing against SAC saying SAC is a born city, SAC is this. Now being in SAC, you have a different type of, perception of it. The fans are great, people is great. So it's definitely an honor to be able to, be somewhere where, people want you.
How have we're in a kind of era where people are talking about so much of this talk is centered on LeBron, of course, but I've been thinking a lot about how players who have been playing more than a decade, how their games have physically changed to adapt to what their bodies can do and
Mm-hmm.
what they're, in how have you felt your game changing? I mean, I mentioned earlier, but it has felt like you have, you know, these things where it just always seems in the mid range that you can get to your spot. You have these tools that feel like they are timeless in a way. I mean, of course, we know time is undefeated, but you could prolong. So, how have you had to adapt your game as you've aged to not only help your teams, but change to the ever-changing NBA, which is a different NBA than it was even 5 years ago?
I think for me, I just try to master what I've always been great at. So it's no denying I have to cope in a sense to what everybody else is doing. Because, you just try to find a way to still be an anomaly of what the game was built on and be great at that to for it to fit in your whole team concept. And that's one thing that I definitely, try to, imply, you see so many guys going out there shooting 10 to 15 threes a night, and that may be cool for them, but I look at it from my perspective of it being, I'm not Steph Curry, I'm DeMar, and this is what I do great, and how can I implement this within our team for us to be better? So for me, I never really got caught up into the changing of the NBA because even last night, just I'm sitting had a conversation with Dominique Wilkins, and you know, just hearing him say, what the game was built on and what guys is missing from the game. Hearing that from a legend like that is, incredible. Even 2 weeks ago, running into Michael Jordan and him even saying one of the only ones still keeping the mid-range game alive. That's it lets you know you're still on the right track. It give other people hope that do appreciate the mid-range game and being able to play that way as well to not discourage them is what it's all about.
I'm gonna ask a couple audience questions, but first I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. And this doesn't need to be like a starting five top thing, but
Mm-hmm.
including you, give me like four of your other favorite players who came out of Compton.
Including me. Uh, so me is one.
Yep.
Go Tayshaun Prince. I don't know. Dang, that's a tough one. I want to make sure I don't miss nobody. Ooh, that's a tough one. Do they got to be? You say, do they have to be in NBA or
No,
just
not at
period?
all. They could be
Oh,
legends of the city, legends of the
oh,
hood.
all right. Guy named David Hamilton. He went to my high school. His nickname was Super Crip. Me, Tayshaun, David Hamilton, Tito Maddox, and who else can I go with? Jeff Trepanga.
I remember Jeff Trepanga.
Yeah.
I feel like I read about David Hamilton. Is David Hamilton the one where there's like the legendary story about him like playing a game after right after he got shot?
Right after he got shot, yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
That's wild.
He
That's
got
wild. I
he
remember
got
reading
shot.
that and being like,
He got shot and still played in the playoff game.
that's incredible. That's incredible. We got time. I'm gonna ask a couple audience questions. We got a time for like two of them. One of them from Mel Gill is about your vulnerability and the way you speak about your experience in mental health. It saved a lot of people as teenagers. How does it feel to know that you've had that much of an impact on people?
I think for me, I still don't believe it because, those same words help me even more. When I hear people come up to me saying what I've done for them, not knowing when they tell me that how much it's done for me to give me the strength and appreciation to continue, trying to just, be able to be vulnerable and put so much out there because, it's such a selfless act. And I don't necessarily do it for the attention or to get credit back, but when I do hear it, it gives me the strength I need to just, keep going, even with my tough days. When I hear those words or read something about somebody telling me that I did something for them, this is something that, it becomes hard to believe, but it gives me even more strength.
Brittany asks, I'm a woman currently serving in the military and being out to sea for months can get the best of me. What are some practical strategies or daily habits that you use to help manage feelings of depression and regain a sense of control in your life?
Yeah, I try to find something light, like a light emotion to kind of dive into. Rather, sometimes I find myself getting on YouTube, finding something funny, paying attention to something light. I kind of try to put something light on my emotions that I could kind of get lost into. I always remember a lot of times when I was feeling down or I was feeling a certain type of way, you'll hear a song that make you feel worse because that song is sad or so for me I always try to find something that puts me in a lighter emotion that could kind of calm down, whether if it's aggression or my emotions down, and I kind of get lost in that. A lot of times this may be silly, but this is one thing that worked for me. Like I used to always find like nephew Tommy prank calls, and I sit there and just like let it run and listen to him, and next thing you know, an hour and a half go by, and I just been laughing, and I forgot why I was what state I was in an hour and a half before. So that's something like that. Just finding some type of light angle that you could kind of dive into emotionally.
There are like a whole lot of Raptor fans kind of asking a similar thing, and so you might not have an answer for this that you want to give, but I'm going to ask it because there's like four people who asked. The short question is, there's a lot of Raptors who are wondering if you would consider ending your legacy where it began, like retiring as a Raptor, doing the like one game, sign a 1 game contract and close that out. Is that something you've thought of, or are you at a point where you're not even thinking about the end yet?
I mean, it's that place would definitely be a poetic type of ending you would want to have. And I never rule out anything when it come to that place because that's where it started. That's where, without that place, I wouldn't be the player who I am now. So I would never ever rule out the possibilities of doing something like that if it made sense for sure.
Were the Kings played in Toronto the night that the Vince Carter thing happened, right? Did I
Right,
remember
right.
that correctly?
Yeah, yep.
That was cool to see, man. It was cool because I feel like Vince Carter is one of those people who he was in the league for so long
Mm-hmm.
that, he got his proper flowers for sure, but I think people don't remember like the early when he was like kept that
Yeah,
franchise.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. He changed sports up there forever for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about those Raptors teams. I think about Chris Bosh too. He kind of was a good bridge player. Those Bosh Raptors teams weren't always great, but he was like up there really changing that, like maintaining what Vince Carter started to build.
Mhm.
I love those teams. I love those teams a lot. I think there's another question here. Oh, this is actually a great question because it's about leaving. You know, someone asked, it's hard to leave family behind. What was the hardest part about leaving California to go to Toronto after growing up there, especially because you were a teenager when it happened?
The hardest part, um, the hardest part was at that time was the weather. That was the hardest part for me because never growing up being around snow, never knowing what it felt like to be in 10-degree weather. That was the toughest part for me, adjusting to the cold, because that was a shell shock for me. Outside of being away from family and friends, the winters was tough for me.
Winter in Toronto is like no joke, like for real, no joke. It's a different kind of. I can't imagine coming from California and experiencing it. Like I'm in Ohio, and even when I go up there in the winter, it's too much. You know, it's like a whole other thing.
Yeah, it's
It's like
something else.
no coat is big, no down coat is big enough.
None.
Um, I'm gonna take a question that someone asked to kind of put my own spin on it because it's about championships and about winning. And I also loved in the book about how openly he wrote about the roadblocks that came with trying to get a championship, you know,
Hmm.
um, because we see that. And I actually think the way fans talk about rings discredits the real struggle, the real actual struggle that it takes to just um, run up against teams and players in the playoffs year after year and just fight with them and fight with them and fight with them. Um, how did you kind of, what was the process for rebuilding yourself and getting ready to go and chase a championship every year, even when you hit these roadblocks? And how are you kind of thinking about your championship journey now, today, as this many years into your career playing with a new team who is in the conversation, in the conversation can make a deep run?
Yeah, I think for me, you just look at it and then you accept the fact of when you play sports, you got to accept the fact of a season is like a mountain. You try to climb this mountain and get to the top, but at some point your hands might get stepped on and you might fall right back down to the bottom. Do you have the will, the want to, the love, and the passion to be able to climb that mountain the next go around? And I think for me, that's just always been like my mindset. Like, you're gonna hit a roadblock. It's gonna be tough. Then you can't expect anything. You just gotta give what you got, and what happens from it at the end of the day, you gotta be willing to live with it. I think for me, I just look at it like, off season, I try to prepare myself the best way possible, and go into my situation to the best of my abilities to help. If not, if I got another go round, you just keep chipping away at it year after year until you may not get it, and sometimes that's okay. Some of the greatest players never been able to win a ring. And I think I just try to stay in the moment of everything and take it, season by season.
Is there has not to bring up a bad memory, but is there a playoff loss that you struggled with the most? Is there one that maybe hurt the most, or do they all kind of hurt the same?
They all kind of hurt the same. It's always that feeling of like, man, what if, or man, I wish we would have did this. So they all feel the same, especially when it sucks you know, um, you got to sit back and go, you know, watch another team still playing and competing in the playoffs. So they all suck the same.
Yeah, yeah. One last question, I think, before Lonnie jumps back in, and this is a good one about discipline. Early on, you talked about discipline and being disciplined and learning discipline in the way that so many athletes think about discipline sometimes only exists in the container of sports, where it's like I'm a disciplined, I've been around athletes where it's like very disciplined on the court, on the floor, on the field, and then they kind of get off the field and they kind of don't have the same material discipline, the grip on the discipline that they have in their athletic life. But for you, as someone who writes about and talks about and thinks very deeply about how to maintain a mental health practice, and to do it well in the midst of a lot of noise, um, how has the discipline that you've sunk into years and years and years of being an athlete informed the way that you treat your mental health practice and stick to it and make sure it's serving you?
Like, how do I do that?
Yeah, yeah. Like, how do you stay
Um,
disciplined in that way?
I mean, I think it's a consistent, battle. Everything just become consistently, tougher at times. And I think for me, I accepted the fact that life is going to be life. Life is going to throw things at you unexpectedly. Life going to throw journeys, experiences at you. And for me, I think it's all about how you learn from it and grow from whatever those obstacles are. Because I never really try to predetermine anything. I more so accept whatever life have to throw at you, because the times we living in is tough. And who knows what another 5 years of life will be like, in the society that we living in. So, I just try to do my best with my inner circle, my support system, learn, grow, experience the good and bad, and try to be better from that, and be better, well aware of, what's to come. And that's one way I kind of keep myself at, an even keel and balance, because we all want great days every single day, but that's just not the reality.
Yeah. DeMar, thank you, man. I can't stress enough how much I appreciated the book, and how much I appreciate how open and vulnerable you are talking about mental health. Like, this was, as a lifetime fan of hoops, like, this was not the kind of thing I always got growing up. I didn't get players talking like this. I didn't get players open about the actual struggles of the career and the toll it can take. So thank you for opening up about that. It's really, and I hope a lot of people read the book and think about their role as fans and how they can perhaps soften some of the struggles of being a player under that level of scrutiny. So thank you.
Yep, appreciate you.
Hanif, thank you so much for always bringing so much to fan and to everything that we ask of you, both about your own work and then when you're also in conversation with other guests. We so love you, and we so love the energy that you put into the world. For those of you maybe possibly not familiar with how, I don't know, but how you're not familiar with Hanif's new book about There's Always This Year, it is such a beautiful piece. So much basketball in there, but so much also about mental health. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous book. And I know Anne-Marie's probably been thrown in links. I've been busy with other things, so I haven't watched all the links. There's a couple questions here I want to remind folks. So we are going to do a 30-minute after hours with both DeMar and Hanif. That's going to start at 8:05 Central. It's coming up. It's less than 10 minutes from now. We're going to give both DeMar and Hanif. This will end at 8 o'clock Central. They'll have both a 5-minute break in between the two. And then we'll wait for them to join in, and then we'll let everybody else in from the waiting room. It'll be 30 minutes. Been a long day already for DeMar and for Hanif, so we're going to keep it a little bit short. But when you come to after hours, you can ask your own questions. You can unmute yourself. A chat is two-way. It's quite lively. Hanif is coming there as a guest. We've letting him off his duties of having to be an interviewer, so that's great. He can answer questions as well. I'm going to throw something to you. There was one question that came up. We had almost 100 questions were submitted through the Zoom registration form, and then got another several dozen tonight during the event. Something that came up multiple times, DeMar, that where people were saying ahead of time, they were wondering if you could give advice to a younger version of yourself, maybe especially when maybe things felt really particularly chaotic or you're very unsure as a teenager. What would you now, as an adult man with your own family, what would you advise that teenager, knowing now what you know?
Nothing. Nothing, because those same things that I was unaware of, or I was naive to, without going through those situations, I don't think I'll be the man who I am today. It's kind of like school, where if the teacher used to tell you, break down the math question of how you got the answer, and just don't put the answer. If you don't show how you break down the answer, do you fully understand how to get the answer?
Yeah.
And that's why I say I wouldn't tell myself anything, because sometimes you gotta break yourself down. Sometimes you gotta go through the things you went through to be sharp, and shape into the person that you need to be. Because those same uncomfortable situations, if you have the head start on it, are you really gonna learn from it the way that you learn from it not knowing? So that's my advice to a younger me. I wouldn't tell him anything.
That's interesting. It is that piece about how it shapes you and it makes you who you are. And I think then a lot of folks had questions following it up. We only have about 1 minute left, where they were wanting to know then, okay, given what you did go through, what would you say were like the core values? Like what were those things that you just stuck to, that helped you get through it?
I think I kind of talked about it in the book. For me, when I had my days where I didn't believe anything, or I was going through my roughest patches, or the doubt come in, I always paid attention to the moon, and the moon was something that showed me that was more to the world than just my problems or what it was that I was going through, and that kind of like always symbolized a deeper emotion for me to keep going, because it's I'm just not the only person that's out there, and that's how I kind of viewed it. And I just, every time I fell, I just kept getting up, because it was always easy to lay there and just not do anything, you know. And just always paying attention to my parents. Like they never stopped. When we didn't have much, they always found a way, some way, somehow, and I always kind of wanted to repay that same type of feeling.
Beautiful. Thank you. And remember the quote. It was, I think your dad talked to you a lot about the moon
Yeah.
piece in the book. It was great. So thank you so much. We appreciate that. We're going to give you guys a 5-minute break where it's 8 o'clock. So we'll be closing this down now. For those of you joining us at after hours, you'll get in the waiting room. And as soon as both Hanif and DeMar are there, we'll be opening up that room. So thank you for your time tonight. And we'll see everyone in just a few minutes. Thanks so much.